So, Leaving Her Mark, Seal Matrices and Objectifying Women in Medieval Britain. Recent interest in gender studies within medieval archaeology has led us to new critiques, while popular audiences have shown an increased interest in historic women's stories. This demand calls us for using archaeological research to engage the public, especially through museums and heritage sites. Go ahead and skip to the next slide, please. With this in mind, this abbreviated paper employs an adapted object biography methodology to explore the lived experience of medieval women through their seals. It aims to answer, what can seals tell us about the identities and activities of medieval women across different regions, social classes, and life stages, and how can we productively communicate medieval women's stories through object biographies. To do this, I explored two medieval women and their seals as case studies. These seals have been sourced from the British Museum and the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and this research aims to showcase the potential of these objects to convey medieval women's lives and enhance storytelling. So, medieval seals. Substantial scholarship exists on medieval seals and sealing practices. Brigitte Bedos-Rezik has argued for the seal's role in the formulation of personal identity, suggesting that seals not only acted as proxies for an individual, but also as embodiments of their owner's identity. Therefore, engraved with their names, seals offer a unique window into the lives of specific women, prompting us to question if these objects ascribed to name individuals can be particularly valuable in understanding the human experience. My research uses an adapted object biography methodology, focusing on the relationships between women and their seals as physical embodiments of the self. Here, the biography of the object is also the biography of its owner. The object cannot be separated from the individual. I aim to bring together historical sources and auxiliary archaeological information, developing a personal biographical approach rooted in the original source object. However, due to the varying sources of the material, one as a museum acquisition and the other as a chance find, the narratives advanced for these women take different forms. Can you skip to the next slide, please? So for our first case study, Elizabeth Woodhull, née Chetwode. In 1838, the British Museum acquired a 15th century bronze gilt seal that can be attributed to Elizabeth Woodhull through its black letter inscription, which prominently displays both her paternal heraldry, the Chetwode arms, and the name of her first husband, Thomas Woodhull. Of the seals in the British Museum and the National Archives, Elizabeth's is the only to feature a complete coat of arms. Notably, beyond her name, the seal lacks also typical feminine markers, distinguishing it from other female seals of the period. Elizabeth's seal instead, like those of her father and brother, prominently features the arms of her knightly Lyons ancestors, identifiable by a lion rampant alongside the Chetwode crosses. This display of family iconography suggests that Elizabeth sought to assert her legitimacy and status through her seal. The absence of traditional feminine motifs may have been a deliberate choice to promote her identity, not merely as a wife or daughter, but as a legitimate representative of her family in her own right. The practice of using masculine iconography to craft identity can be seen in other high-status women's seal. Jessica Jasper, it highlights how Empress Matilda, even after her second marriage to Count Geoffrey of Anjou, continued to use imperial motifs associated with her first husband, the Holy Roman Emperor Henry V. Matilda's power derived from her father and her first marriage, much like Elizabeth's claim through her paternal line and her first husband. By maintaining these symbols, both women could have reinforced their legitimacy and authority. Additionally, despite remarrying, Elizabeth used the title of her first husband, Thomas Woodhull, on her seal. This could be due to her established role as a representative of the Woodhull line. However, it was also common for dowagers to retain their best title. So while Elizabeth's second husband, William Ludsop, was socially and financially inferior to her, her association with the Woodhull estate remained a significant asset. By using her seal, she reinforced her claim and position as a dowager to the Woodhull estate. Documentary evidence has been especially useful in tracing Elizabeth's life and in inferring when her seal was made. After her first husband's death in 1421, Elizabeth controlled her dower lands in Bedfordshire. Her influence peaked in 1458 when she inherited her ancestral lands in Buckinghamshire following the deaths of her brother and his two daughters. I suggest the seal was therefore created during this transition, serving as a tool to cement her identity and assert her authority as the head of the Chetwood family. Elizabeth's seal therefore not only marked her legitimacy and personal agency, but also underscored her role as a significant figure in her family's lineage. Her use of the seal reflects a conscious effort to project her status and authority, transcending the typical limitations placed on medieval women. Elizabeth's death in her 80s saw her commemorated with a funerary monument alongside her family, a testament to her enduring influence and the legacy she sought to establish through her seal. Would you mind swapping to the next slide, please? So our next case study is that of Muriel Joppis. In October 2023, a lead seal dating to the 13th century, inscribed with a female face, was found in Norfolk. The inscription can be interpreted as the feminine name Muriel with the surname Joppis. Muriel has been identified as a common name for Jewish women in medieval England, while Joppis is of Hebrew origin. Considering this, I theorize this seal belonged to a Jewish woman. While understanding this will never be confirmed, I will demonstrate why it's possible. Jewish women's seals are relatively limited. This can be linked to the type of business Jews engaged in. Jewish business was related to monetary transaction, which did not require as many written records. Instead, it's more effective to analyze the names on seals and their date of production. With Edward I's expulsion of the Jewish people from England in 1290, seals from after this are unlikely to belong to Jews. The location of Muriel's 13th century seal in Holmhale, a village near Thetford in Norfolk, may be particularly assuring of her Jewish identity. Thetford was one of the smaller Jewish communities in East Anglia, alongside Bury St. Edmunds, Bungay, King's Lyd, and Castle Rising. So beyond its correspondence with Jewish East Anglian communities, there's evidence of Jewish women in southern England owning and using seals. This is clear from a seal impression of Mildgod, a Jewish widow in Oxford who took control of her husband's business and continued it for a further 20 years following his death. You can see an example of this at Merton College. Michael Adler also asserts, quote, Jewish women played a considerable part in the economic life of the Jewry. Adler has identified at least 15 Jewish women who acted as moneylenders in the 13th century, including the notable Laetitia of Winchester. It is within this wider context we can situate this object and its owner. Muriel's contemporaries were not merely meek wives, but independent entrepreneurs. Her seal reinforces that Jewish businesswomen in East Anglia did wield personal and financial independence. However, looking at the seal itself, it may be determined that Muriel was not an exceptionally wealthy woman. Lead alloy is commonplace for seal manufacture, accessible to a large proportion of the public. Her wealth and agency may have been limited by her minority religious identity. She may have also experienced persecution. The violence against medieval Jewish communities in East Anglia is clear in documentary and archaeological evidence. For example, recent genome analysis from a medieval mass burial in Norwich is suggestive of a Jewish community that experienced violent attacks documented in the historic record. This research featured on major news outlets, including the BBC and The Guardian, demonstrating a public appetite for medieval Jewish people's stories. Indeed, Muriel may have been alive during the heightened tensions between Christians and Jews in the late 13th century. This animosity against her community may even be responsible for her seal's disposal. Next slide, please. To conclude, examining case studies of named individuals in the archaeological record benefits our understanding of gender identity, social status, and ethnic and religious background, though narratives do become more inclusive when individuals are present in both the historical and archaeological record. Accordingly, Elizabeth and Muriel's narratives take different forms based on the available information. Elizabeth's life as an elite woman is easier to fill in the gaps. However, through her seal, we are able to glean her own approach to power and agency. So while her story may be more familiar to us as an elite woman, it is no less valuable, contributing to a well-rounded understanding of gender politics. However, for Muriel, we must use contextual evidence and our own imagination to construct her story. Both as a woman and as a Jew, Muriel's life would have been unlikely to be exhibited through documentary evidence. So here, archaeological evidence, such as a seal, is better suited to exploring her story. Medieval minority individuals like Muriel deserve our consideration, both because they are relevant to modern audiences and in their own right as active players in their story. Ultimately, these women's stories are useful for understanding how medieval women interacted with the world around them. And despite the varying evidence, I hope that I have hinted it's possible to create impactful storytelling about medieval women's lives through object studies. Thank you.